Another thing, too, that I think is interesting with this whole dynamic is before we've talked about the dominance of one player, right? The Tiger Wood era, the Paige Pierce era, even the Paul McBeth era. We've talked about how there's pros and cons to that, right? Having one player dominate. It's very exciting. It gives you someone to root against. There's also cons to it.
Yeah.
What are the pros and cons? Because one thing we haven't really talked about is on MPO, it's really been a two-horse race.
Yeah,
right?
It has.
What are the pros and cons to having two players dominate the sport? Because I feel like again, this era is not quite over, but it's coming to an end of the Paul and Ricky dominating back and forth. Who's going to win?
Yeah.
People are probably still picking them in their top 3 or top 5 more than anyone else.
Sure.
But every weekend, I don't think we're going to see Paul, Ricky win. I think it's going to be some other people sneaking up there. So what are the kind of the pros and cons, do you think, of having that type of rivalry at the top?
Well, I don't really see any cons, really. I mean, and the only reason we really talked about the Paul McBeth era and not the Paul versus Ricky era as much is because Paul is the one winning the world titles for most of the stretch.
Yeah.
And that's one event out of the year. Now, he did win the majority of the events in most of those years. I mean, we could look back and find the stats, but I'm sure he won most of the Ricky Paul battles. But like when you look at like the best example I can think of off the top of my head is like Magic and Bird in the NBA. Like the NBA was not popular. Those two guys were what drove it to popularity before MJ came in. So it was like a two-person rivalry is what started the success of that league. You know, at the end of the day, whenever like players are being dominant to like drive the popularity of a league, it's just like they're making the league more popular because it's exciting to watch and because they get a lot of fans. People latch onto them. So I think it's almost even better when you have two people. That could be argued either way. Like we've never like in ball golf with the whole Tiger Woods era, you know, he's very much you know, given the credit of being the guy who like made ball golf to that next level of popularity because everybody rooted for the Tiger. We don't really know what that would look like if it was Tiger and another guy like that.
Well, Phil was kind of, I don't know a ton about golf.
Yeah, no. Phil was.
I just know whenever
Phil was
Tiger's
very
mentioned,
successful
Phil's
during that
behind him.
era,
Yeah.
and there were years where they were kind of neck and neck, but not really.
Not at
it
the
was
same
still
level.
it was still the Tiger Woods era, especially when you talk about major championships. Tiger won way more. So in disc golf, it's tough to say if there are any cons to that or which one would be better. But I think a two horse race is great because you're going to get fans on either side. It creates debate and intense rivalries amongst not only the players themselves but the fans, you know, rooting for their respective players. But yeah, I don't think there's really a problem with either one. But I personally, as a fan, I think having two people in it is more exciting because like if it's one person domination, it's exciting to see somebody playing so well, but the actual event itself might not be quite as exciting because it's not coming down to the stretch. Whereas when we have Paul and Ricky, you know, yeah, the rest of the card might be getting smoked, but at least we're going to see it get tight down to the end and have an exciting finish. So that's what I'd prefer.
Yeah, I agree. I think that having a two-horse... Now, first off, there's no way to control this.
No.
Like, there's no way you're picking and choosing who.
No.
Because, I mean, even like with Paige's dominance, Kat's been there too. But I agree that I think having two dominant players, two dominant figures in the sport is better simply because this is going to sound weird, but it like creates division, if that makes sense, to where division like Duke versus UNC is whenever I hear the word rivalry, that's what I think of, right?
Yeah.
And if you're a Duke fan, your blood kind of boils towards UNC for no reason other than you're a Duke fan. You know what I mean? I can't stand Roy Williams, not because he's not a good coach. I'm a Duke fan. I just can't stand the guy. You know what I mean? And I think that kind of, it does the same thing to where now, not only am I rooting for Duke, but I'm rooting against UNC. So it causes me as a fan to, if I'm that diehard towards Paul and Ricky, I'm not. I don't really know many people are, but there's going to be. As the sport progresses, if people get that diehard towards Paul and Ricky, not only do you want Ricky to win, you really want Paul to lose.
You're like paying attention twice as much.
Exactly.
Right.
So then the next weekend, if Ricky's not there or Ricky's not in contention, but Paul is, you just want to make sure Paul doesn't win. You know what I mean? Like even the NCAA tournament, I cared about the UNC, was it Wisconsin game?
Yeah.
And it gave me great pleasure to see Wisconsin slap them around.
I got smoked.
Yeah. It gave that brought joy to my heart. You know what I mean? That weekend, I was a Wisconsin fan that game.
Well, you had to be because Duke wasn't there.
Exactly. Well, no, anyways, that's what I'm saying. Like, it's like if Paul doesn't show up, and you're a Paul fan, and it's Ricky versus Calvin Heimberg.
You're gonna cheer for Calvin.
Yeah, put the pizza in the oven, man. Let's do this. You know what I mean? I'm cheering for Calvin all the way. I think that's the type of thing that is great for the sport because it causes fans to really care. And then if they're both there, even people who aren't Ricky or Paul fans want to see the show.
Right.
You know what I mean? That's where even where people aren't Duke and UNC fans, they're going to watch the game.
Yeah.
Because it's going to be a show. That's one thing, too, is if Ricky and Paul are both in contention, it's going to get close. It's going to get tight. That's the best part of all rivalries is it's going to get close. You can think back to the European Open where Paul was at like 8 strokes the final round or 6 or 7 strokes the final round on Rick, I believe it was. You knew going into the final round, it's going to get close.
Yeah.
And it did. It got close. I believe Paul actually won it. You know what I mean? That's one thing that I really like about this rivalry. And Rick was even talking about it in this Nick and Matt show interview is he's like, if one of us is in contention, like if we're both within striking distance, like it's going to be a birdie fest.
Yeah.
He's like, at that point, we're not concerned about the field. We're concerned about, and he actually said like, as much as the field probably hates it, if Paul and I are in contention, like all we're caring about is beating the other person that's in contention with us. Like when we show up and we're at the top, the course is going to get destroyed that day because they're both going to show up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I would bet that there is a handful of times maybe where you can like look it around and Ricky and Paul are neck and neck going into the final round and one of them played bad.
Yeah, it's true.
It's normally like 15 down, 13 down. And they're both like, holy cow, like 12 down was the previous world record or previous course record and you just both beat it.
Right.
It's pretty impressive stuff. But I definitely think that era is coming to an end just because of the amount of talent that we're seeing.